All right, let's do 10 minutes on USC football.
Yeah.
So, Alabama close won, Washington close won, Oklahoma close won, USC close lost. Once again, the defense couldn't make a stop. So I think the defensive side, I think you can shore up a lot of what they do with a new defensive coordinator, with Alex Grinch moving on. I do think Bear Alexander will play in the pros. I think they have a linebacker who's a pro. I think they've got a safety that's a pro. They don't have Michigan talent. They don't have Bama, Georgia talent. But if you went to like team 6 to team 16 in the college football world, their talent's somewhat comparable. I mean, Washington doesn't have great talent. They have a good edge rusher. Here's something, let me throw at you. What's really regressed has been their offensive line. And you're like, they got a couple NFL guys there. They absolutely upgraded with transfers. They actually have some depth on the interior due to recruiting. What's happened? As I watch them, I think Caleb is just ad-libbing a lot more than he was last year. Between the confidence, the Heisman, the power, the NIL money, he's sort of doing his own thing. And it's a little Josh Allen that we always say the Bills' O-line is terrible. It's not. They've got a Pro Bowler, but Josh, at times, he's a little more, this year, I think, he's a little more defined or refined. But when Josh is out there running, it's hard as an offensive lineman. You're kind of at the whim of what Josh Allen wanted to do. And when I watch USC, because their O-line looks terrible, but it's not terrible. Their personnel's not terrible. I wonder if Caleb now is sort of like, hey, I'm out of the natty picture. I got my NIL money. I'm going to do what I want to do. You think that could be possible?
Do you remember when the division and really some of the animosity started in Seattle? Probably around 17, 18, everyone started shitting on their offensive line and saying Russell Wilson was running for his life. And a lot of former offensive linemen said, well, he's taken off early and he would make hero ball plays. Now, he would make them, so it kind of band-aided, well, look at what he did. But the result was you should have just stayed in the pocket. And clearly the coaching staff, and everyone just kind of started butting heads. I think Caleb's talent is extraordinary. His arm strength, his athleticism, his ability to throw moving left to right, especially across his body, Mahomes style. He had a throw last night across his body to the left side that was only 5 guys on this planet can do that. But he definitely has this hero ball syndrome, which might not be all his fault. The program is in somewhat disarray. I do think, and I get this a lot because they're like, oh, your boy, he's hyping Caleb up again. And listen, I'm guilty of this too. We kind of anoint players as generational talents he has generational capabilities from an arm standpoint, but as a prospect, like if you go Luck or Elway or Manning, he's short relative to those guys. Like the great prospects have all been 6'4" to 6'5", right? And I talked to a guy who's been around them, thinks he's a shade under 6'1", but he's built like a tank. Yeah, he's thick. He knows that. He's very thick and powerful. I do think the all-time great prospect stuff, he's a really good prospect who is going to go 95% number 1 overall, and worst case scenario, go number 2 overall. But I think we see some flaws. I mean, we see some of the numbers now against better teams. Notre Dame, and especially Utah, high-end defensive players, well-coached, guys that are going to be playing on Sunday, and he doesn't look like he did against Arizona in some of these games. Right. Now, listen, the program, I think banning the reporter, not allowing NFL scouts in there for a month and a half, not having the players talk. Like, to me, some of their priorities, it's like, is Nick Saban obsessed with that bullshit? Of course not. Like, what is Lincoln? Yeah. I think some of their priorities, and I think sometimes, I remember when the 49ers drafted Hufanga and Drake Jackson, and they said, obviously the SC was in shambles then with Clay Helton. Yeah. And they said, Drake Jackson got a bad rap, but so do most players when coaches are getting fired and things are in disarray. Hufanga was the rare guy that even people that are getting fired, getting tarnished, coaches, they all had good things to say about him. And that's a very, very small percentage of humans that are able to kind of rise above it. And I don't know Caleb. I've never heard bad things, but it does feel like he's kind of in the middle right now of the weirdness. And I got to start with the blame. You pay a guy $120 million. It does start with the head coach. And it feels like he's lost control a little bit of just some of
Yes.
the basic details of a high-end program.
Something magical happens when the third quarter ends and the fourth quarter begins. The energy changes. The fourth quarter, that's where games are won. And in business, it's where sales teams become legends. The fourth quarter. That's why HubSpot built Sales Hub to give sales reps the deal-making tools they need to win in the fourth quarter and close the year strong. Sales Hub Prospecting Workplace organizes your schedule, your to-do lists, your goals all in one place to save your team time in the precious fourth quarter. Smart sequences help sales reps close deals faster than ever. Plus, AI forecasting helps you accurately predict future successes. And with an easy-to-use management tool, reps can find, track, and close deals all in one place, which means less hoping for deals and more crushing targets. Put your sales team on the fast track now to winning the fourth quarter with Sales Hub. Learn more at HubSpot.com/sales. Yeah, so Pete Carroll was perfect. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was obvious after about 4 or 5 years. He'd been in the NFL. So he didn't care about people on campus. He didn't care about media. Pete treated USC. He was like, scouts, GMs, get in here. Media, Snoop Dogg.
Doors wide open. Everybody.
Why? These college coaches, people I like, Urban Meyer, get very provincial, very Gainesville, very Tuscaloosa, small, timid media that has one game to cover in town. It's like Lincoln. We're not Norman, Oklahoma. There's 2 NFL teams. The Dodgers draw 5 million. 2 NBA teams. LAFC, the Galaxy, UCLA. It's like we just don't need. If USC goes on a 2-game losing streak, LA doesn't go. And so I think Lincoln's finding out, and I think college coaches have found this out here, is that Pete was perfect. Pete's a big city, big thinker. He'd had Boston media, New York media. Pete knew, you couldn't, Pete just was used to the wind, the heat you get. Boston media is as cranky as any. And so when Pete got to LA, like he was, take shots at me. I don't care. I think Lincoln sometimes feels a little like those small college town guys that want to control everything. And that's not LA. We got options here.
The other thing is Pete, having been an assistant coach for the great 49er teams, been with the Jets, and then took over Bill Parcells' squad. He understood what elite players looked like at every position. Like he valued Reggie Bush just like he did Brian Cushing or a great defensive lineman or a great offensive lineman. They were good at every position because he emphasized it, right? Look at Saban, how he's adapted. And I that's my one question with Lincoln. I know he's going to be able to find quarterbacks and wide receivers and running backs. Does he truly understand how to find Ray Maluga at linebacker or an elite, Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety? Because he's never been around it at Oklahoma. And his mentor in college football, and I think you are who your mentors are when you're young as a football coach. It kind of shapes your offensive philosophy. Like if you watch Kellen Moore, he kind of likes tricky shit. Well, he comes from Chris Peterson, who loved that stuff. And it gets ingrained in you as a coach. It doesn't mean you can't adapt, but Andy Reid played at BYU in the early 80s when they were the only college team throwing it forever. He's been throwing it for 30 plus years. And you watch Lincoln, offense. And when that goes, the defense, and you know better than me, he clearly really likes the defensive coordinator as a friend. Now their presence, like who's forcing him to fire him? I know from a football standpoint he should, but are we 100% sure like he's going to do that? Because I think he needs help in the personnel department on what to look for. And I would go, if I was him, I would go to like, Bama, Georgia, a program like that, and hire their GM. What do you need? What's your salary? $500,000 there. We'll give you $900,000 to come here and help us build the defense the SEC way. Because I heard this. Well, there's not as many great defensive prospects in LA. Who gives a shit? It's 2023. Go buy the best guys in the South or Texas. Right? He has Pete used to do that well before NIL. Their players were coming from, Jersey here, PA here, Louisiana here. There is no excuse at USC. I honestly, and listen, Utah, what Kyle Whittingham has done is freaking awesome. But those people at USC do not view Utah as equals. Last night was one thing last year. Okay, we get them at home this year. To lose like that's worse than the Notre Dame loss.
Hey, well, listen. Utah had a backup quarterback throw for how many yards? Utah was great on third down. Big yards.
He's their third string, Colin, because their backup got hurt in a scrimmage in August. He's their third string quarterback.
Well, hey, Arizona's backup quarterback gave USC fits 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's
one more. I watched a lot of the UNC game for what it was. Just came at a time during the day where not Drake May, and I've been kind of hyping him up. He's a good prospect. I think he's like 85% of kind of Herbert, big, athletic,
that's
good
what
arm.
Yes.
But he's not. And I had a buddy that his assistant GM was like, I'm glad we're not in the quarterback kind of realm because I think Caleb thing's going to get weird. His dad plays a big role. There's a lot of things that are just going to be said about just moving forward. And then the Drake May, he's going to go really high, but he by no means is not just some guarantee save your franchise. And that's how it turns out every time because, I'm sure like Caleb, are they one more loss away? Like, would he play out the string? Or I just looked at their schedule. Obviously, I think they play Cal this week, but then they go Oregon, Washington, UCLA. They easily could lose all three of those games. UCLA, I didn't realize. I mean, their defense, Anthony Linson's their defensive coordinator. They are really good on defense.
Oh, yeah. USC could lose. I think they will lose to Oregon.
They'll beat Cal.
They'll beat Cal. I think they'll lose to Washington. I think they'll beat UCLA. But this is the Lincoln Riley. It's a bad time for the Pac-12 to be the best it's ever been. It's not a good year for Lincoln to struggle. No. And by the way, Oregon pro quarterback, Washington pro quarterback, UCLA I don't think they've ever had a 5-star quarterback at a high school. It's the first 5-star guy.
Yeah.
And so for the third string quarterback for Utah to just march up and down the field, it's like this is he hadn't thrown
touchdowns. He was averaging like 5 yards a pass attempt the last couple of weeks. He looked like Joe Montana out there moving around last night making plays.
Both teams yesterday I think averaged 6.9 yards a play. That's fine if you have Caleb. A third string quarterback can't average 6.9 yards a play. So it is big problems.